Welcome to the People Experience Pulse podcast, your gateway to the new frontier of human experiences at work. On the PX Pulse, we're all about elevating experiences, fostering belonging, and building remarkable workplace cultures in a fast evolving world. Disconnection among global team members can cost companies thousands in lost productivity every year. Yet, a cohesive and well-connected global team can turn this around, creating a more engaged and productive workforce. On today's episode, Vicki Flier Hudson and Jeff Bond discuss building and sustaining global team cohesion. Vicki and Jeff debunk common myths about global teams and provide practical strategies for building high-performing organizations. You'll learn the importance of understanding and respecting cultural differences, ways to foster inclusivity and psychological safety, and much more. Stay tuned to hear practical tips and insights to build global team cohesion within your organization.
Are you looking to make your workplace more human? Check out my friends at CoolLeaf. What I love about CoolLeaf is that it helps leaders create connection, engagement, and recognition. You can celebrate team wins, reward colleagues, and have fun with your coworkers. You can build a culture of appreciation and feedback that boosts morale, retention, and performance. CoolLeaf also simplifies measuring and improving the employee experience with pulse surveys, rewards, and integrations with your everyday tools. To learn more about CoolLeaf and how it can make your work more human, visit coolleaf.com/trycoolleaf. That's COOLEAF.com/trycoolleaf to book your free demo today and see how top workplaces use CoolLeaf to put their people first and thrive. Welcome back, People Experience leaders, to another episode of the People Experience Pulse, where we focus on empowering you as senior leaders and experts in employee experience, particularly in large distributed organizations. Today's episode is all about building and sustaining global team cohesion. And I am here, as usual, with my lovely co-host, Vicki Flier Hudson. How are you today, really, Vicki?
Hey, Jeff. Well, how am I really? Well, I think I'm a little somber because I attended a Juneteenth event in my town of Roswell, Georgia yesterday. And I knew some of the history of my town, but I found out some kind of additional unpleasant things. And it was good that I found them out. I think it's important, but made me a little sad. How are you? Really?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, it's been a busy week. My two kiddos and my wife are down at church camp all week, and it's a sleepaway camp. So it's just been me and my youngest. And it's actually been really nice to spend some time with her. I took her to the movies yesterday, and we've been at the pool every night, and just having that one-on-one time with my kiddo when I have three. And it's kind of hard to divide sometimes. It's been really special this week, but I understand the somberness of yesterday. And certainly you have to know the story to own it and then be able to do better going forward.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad you got that time with your kid. So, hey, out there to all of our listeners, I am extremely excited about this topic today, in spite of my somberness, because building team cohesion across global workforce is one of my passions. And it is such a vital aspect of creating a productive and a engaged workforce. So with that, let's dive in and share some practical insights for you. So, Jeff, we have talked a lot about communication in our last two episodes. And for those who haven't listened yet, be sure to check those out. But today we're focusing more broadly on cohesion, which encompasses but is not limited to communication. And the central question that we want to address is, how do you build and sustain a high-performing global team despite all the obstacles?
Right. And global teams are becoming the norm. And they are often distributed across multiple time zones and cultures and functions, which introduces a lot of potential obstacles. So we'll start, as always, by debunking some of the common myths and then give you 4 practical ways to build high performance on multicultural teams, despite some of the challenges that are evident within that.
Yeah, there are a lot of myths out there about global teams, and The funny thing is, I kind of tend to see the same ones pop up over and over again. And, all the 20 years I've been doing this work, it's like these myths are really sticky and they tend to lead to a lot of repeats of the same misunderstandings. So, myth number one, because you're a company with the same goals, culture doesn't really matter. The reality is very different. So, when you think about your teams as one company, that is a great thing. And it's necessary because everybody wants to center around like your company values and your mission. That's awesome. But there's an and here. So, you are one company and you need to understand how culture, whether that's national or regional, affects the way that you communicate and work. Because if you don't, you ignore that at your peril, right?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And ignoring cultural differences can absolutely lead to the major communication breakdowns and misunderstandings that we were addressing in the last couple episodes. And the second myth we wanted to explore was that as long as you have your processes down, people think that you can just align on projects. And while there's some truth to that, and it's great to have processes well formulated, very important, it takes a lot more than that to build and sustain a high performing, cohesive global team. You actually need to talk about communication and expectations and how you collaborate and get things done, hold one another accountable, and then plan for the challenges that will inevitably come.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about how you do that in a second. But before we do that, we want to talk about a third myth, which is after COVID, people have just gotten used to working virtually. Well, that is true to some extent, but a lot of obstacles still exist or have been created from COVID. So, isolation, mental health decline, difficulty establishing connections with team members, and so many more. So, to be a high performing team, which we know we keep repeating that, but that's the goal, right? You need to be really intentional rather than just assume that all of that has been worked out after COVID.
Yeah, I've come to learn the value of intentionality and how important that is to our daily behaviors and actions and how we interact with human beings in the workforce or really just in our everyday lives. So let's jump into our core discussion here, Vicki. You've worked with a lot of global teams over the last several decades. What are some key strategies that you've seen work well in building and sustaining cohesion?
So, as you know, and some of your listeners might know, I am a huge space buff. So, I love anything to do with space exploration. And I've probably read every book there is on the Apollo moon landing and the International Space Station. And one of the things I have discovered that has made both of those missions such a success is something called mission rules. So, it's basically conversations and then documentation, planning for things that might be obstacles in the future. So it could be anything from how are you going to operate meetings? How are you going to deal with email response, roles and responsibilities, and conflict? So, for example, in a meeting, you might say that you're going to set clear expectations about participation and follow up actions. But a lot of us, we don't necessarily talk about these things enough in advance. We wait until it becomes a problem, right?
Absolutely. And really just understanding that gives you kind of that core grounding amongst your colleagues and your teams. So when you do come to a collaborative work session or you do come to an all hands meeting or a town hall or any time where you're convening a group of colleagues, you can have that baseline understanding of how you want to show up and make your values visible within that organization. I find that every organization has an all hands meeting, for instance, and when they come there and it falls short of the expectations of what colleagues are looking for in one another in their leadership and the way that new ideas and purpose is presented to the company, it can really disrupt the culture. And so the idea of coming up with these mission rules really starts to be a grounding exercise so that people have that clear expectation and we can hold one another accountable as well as show up knowing what everyone is kind of anticipating the environment to be like. So it's really, really effective. What else should teams consider, Vicki?
So I am a really big fan of upfront communication, and that's kind of what the mission rules are all about, but it doesn't necessarily have to be formal or even documented. So for example, when we were planning in the recent training that we did for a client, for all those emergency scenarios that could, what if your internet went down? What if my internet went down? And then actually coming up with a process. And we did all that in like 5 minutes,
Hmm.
but we were ready. So, on the International Space Station, they have, of course, emergency procedures for everything. But beyond that, you also want to talk about just a proactive approach to your team. How do you want to be as a team? How do you want to acknowledge different languages, different accents, all of that? It's more just, like you said, being highly intentional and talking about everything up front.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to get into how important it is to acknowledge holidays and things that people have on their normal schedules that maybe we don't acknowledge on a global scale or we're not aware of. I hear this complaint from clients time in and time out that not recognizing holidays can really affect scheduling and team morale.
Oh my gosh, I hear that complaint just constantly. And you would think it's sort of an obvious thing, but really it's not, because if you're in your own world and you're just heads down doing your work every day, you're going to acknowledge and remember your own holidays, but you're not necessarily expanding that thought process out. But when you are part of a global team, it's really important, because not only is it a scheduling issue. I mean, I've had a client who like walked in and found out that a colleague was going to be out for 2 weeks on a significant holiday. So that was a huge problem. But also it's a gesture of goodwill, and it builds trust if you actually show that appreciation and acknowledgement of other people's significant things in their culture and their world.
Yeah. And then lastly, there's just the idea about being intentional about time zones. Talk about availability, the time difference, time off, when and what hours team members are willing to flex and when they're normally working, and just being able to acknowledge and appreciate people who work at odd hours to accommodate others, and using the asynchronous tools to be able to leave things in a better place than where you found it and give it to your next team member, so that they can take the ball and run with it, so to speak.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. So we want to leave you with 4 ways to enhance global team cohesion that have worked well for us and our clients. And we are part of a team as well. So we have to use these practices every day, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
So the first is, it's so important to foster a culture of inclusivity and psychological safety. And that's not just me saying that, that is research over and over again. So we need to create an environment where team members feel safe to express their ideas or their concerns or even their mistakes without the fear of retribution. And this is something that builds trust. But of course, we need to do this with cultural consideration, because people in one culture might feel less comfortable than someone in another culture. So we need to have that in our minds. And the way we can do that is to build trust through celebrating things like cultural holidays, recognizing those diverse perspectives, and making team members feel valued. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, and there's things you can do. I mean, there's a lot of tactics. You can implement regular culture days and recognize heritage months where team members are able to share aspects of their cultural backgrounds that foster appreciation and respect for diversity. We actually get to learn something about one another. And by making those things visible in large format meetings like all hands, for instance, or when you would normally gather the entire company, it takes that diversity and it puts it front and center, makes it visible within the organization. And that can really start to permeate the psychological safety aspect within the organization because it is on such a large platform at such a significant time.
That's true. It sends like a message, saying this is important, which I love. The other strategy that we want to share with you is to make the most of collaborative technology, but make sure that everyone has access to that technology and that they know how to use it. Because there is such a thing as technology inequity. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. But if everyone does have access and knowledge about these tools, use them to the best of your ability. So to support not only synchronous communication, like talking one on one, but all that time across time zones where you can't work together, you need to make sure that people have the ability with tools like Slack Teams, Trello, to maintain sort of what I would call a continuous drip banter, making sure that things are just going back and forth. And yeah, you got to have that collaboration consistently.
Yeah, collaboration and communication are really the two key elements of a cohesive team. And the good news is tools like Slack, for instance, which we use all the time, are really fusing those two together and becoming more project focused, where you can create lists that people share. You can have pipeline. You can have project flow. It's very much turning into like a Trello, for instance. It's kind of taking a lot of those tools that maybe are on disparate systems like Asana or Monday.com or anything, and they're bringing it under one platform. So where you communicate and where you engage in fun and team building ways also becomes the place where you get things done. So you're not kind of like overwhelmed with the amount of technology. And so the technology is just getting better and better and better. And being able to use that in ways that help personalize the way in which you operate together and how you communicate with things like video messaging or voice notes to your teammates or colleagues really can bring better tone than the old way of doing things, which is like writing emails back and forth to an ad nauseum level.
Totally. Yeah, we're a little anti-email in this team. So another important part of building a cohesive, high-performing team is to establish clearly who does what. This is another complaint I get a lot, especially with teams who are onboarding a lot of new people at once. So if you're having like a hiring surge, or you're having a function that is moving to another location in the globe, it's really important to define like what is the purpose of the project or the team, what are the individual roles, and then what are the expectations to avoid confusion. Because I think especially when new folks come in, there's a lot of assumed background knowledge that people have that they don't think necessarily to share with those new people and onboard them. So you need to just regularly revisit and realign. So don't just align once at the beginning of a project, align consistently, because between cultural differences, time zones, language differences, there's a lot of room for things to get off course, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and really appointing somebody on every team, every project team that can serve as the project manager to be there in service of their entire team to empower them, but being able to identify them as the owner who can help to assign those roles, make sure there's no gaps, make sure everyone has a clear objective and a time like an end date in mind of when things are due, because then you can just go off and do the work and get things done, which really should be what work is all about. It shouldn't be about micromanaging butts and seats, or when people are working or when their little green dot is on their Slack or Teams, because it is about just trusting one another and then being able to get the work done, and being able to see clearly when the work product is falling short because of a deadline missed or something. That's how we should really evaluate success in our workspace, and having those clear goals and roles really helps to resolve that accountability issue.
That's so true. Results only, right?
Yeah.
That's what we care about. So, our last sort of check in around things that make global teams function really well is promoting continuous learning and development. So, particularly around the area of cross cultural competence, this is something that research has shown again and again, does take time and consistent effort to develop. Even to move the needle a small amount, it takes some effort and intentionality. So we want to consistently encourage team members to develop skills ongoing and to provide access to training programs or coaching or resources that are relevant to their roles, because it doesn't just enhance their capability, but it contributes to the team overall. And it is just something that, especially with the pace at which things are changing, which sometimes I feel like I cannot keep up, we need to keep learning and keep developing those skills.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen in a one-off situation. We kind of talked about that a little bit in the myths, but offering cross-cultural training sessions, offering downstream content, giving people the tools to empower them and to create an inclusive environment to where all of that just becomes part of your everyday workflow. Not just this, like you said it before, Vicki, this thingified performative thing, right? That exists in a vacuum and it's like a one-time thing and then people forget it. but creating environments like employee resource groups and mentorship programs where experienced team members can guide and support maybe less experienced colleagues, but just like making space for cohesion to be prioritized and part of your everyday workflow. And it will absolutely enhance your overall success and productivity. I think Gallup said it was like multi-billion dollars of lost productivity and in this issue. I can't remember the
Yes.
exact number when I was
It
doing
was
the
something
research,
like
but it was like staggering, so it's important.
For sure. I was just about to say something around the profitability piece, because for anyone out there who thinks it's just a nice to have sensitivity issue, believe us, it's far more than that. So a couple of small steps that you might take to create this cohesion: maybe just pick one small area to create mission rules. In other words, pick something small to make more clear and explicit up front. So maybe that's just your email response times, or the way you want to operate a virtual meeting. Things have to be a lot more explicit and discussed openly in global virtual teams than they do in person. So just something to keep in mind. And also, it's so important to utilize the resource you already have, which is all the people on your team. If you've got different cultures on your team, why not have everybody teach each other something about their culture rather than look it up on the internet? I mean, you can also get help with that, but your colleagues are your best resource. So maybe have a cultural fun fact at the beginning of a meeting, or discuss different cultural approaches to a project, which, by the way, is no longer offensive to do. I think in the past, people thought talking about cultural differences was maybe tricky or offensive, but it's not. As long as you do it objectively rather than judgmentally, it's a good thing for us to do. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And the more that you can just make the workplace human and allow people to connect on that level versus it being all about the work product and getting things done, just make it part of your everyday flow. And if you normalize that by making those things visible, again, at those big meetings like all hands, for instance, like that's where people feel more psychologically safe to do that in their small ways, in their small meetings, whether that be one-on-one or in their ERGs or any of those contexts.
For sure.
As we wrap up, just remember that building and sustaining global team cohesion isn't just about avoiding misunderstandings. It really is about creating a supportive and collaborative environment where every team member feels valued.
Absolutely. And remember that this journey of improving team cohesion does not end here. So, for more insights, tools, and conversations on creating a cohesive and inclusive workplace, visit us at peoplefirstellevation.com. We are all about fostering collaboration and support, so don't hesitate to click on the Let's Work Together button for a free, no pressure chat.
Hey, I'm really thankful for you all joining us today on the People Experience Pulse. Your commitment to developing people-first workplaces that thrive is really what makes this community so impactful. Every effort, no matter how small, it really brings us closer to a future where work is a platform for connection, understanding, and a shared humanity.
What a great vision. So until next time, keep building those connections, keep leading with empathy, and most importantly, keep elevating the human experience in every interaction, every project, every day. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us for another insightful episode of the People Experience Pulse. Now the real challenge begins, putting what you've learned into practice. The change you create, no matter how small, could be the spark that ignites an exceptional people experience in your organization and beyond. If you found value in today's conversation, we'd greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us deliver high-value content and reach more listeners like you. You can find other inspiring episodes and additional resources at our website, thepxpulse.com. Join our community at thepxpulse.com. Thank you again for joining us on the People Experience Pulse. Until next time, remember, the heartbeat of any organization is its people. Let's make every pulse count.